Nyeri, and Nairobi, of course. And our question today is, what is it with having chaotic and violent elections in Kenya and even the by-elections? And is there something that we are lacking? Is there something that we need to do? So that is the question that we ask today, and I hope that you're going to deliberate on it today so that we can at least have a few answers that will help us even to ensure that our elections are conducted properly, even as we move towards the general elections, which are just around the corner. And for today's session, we have with us some of the participants are going to be the panelists for today's session to just guide us through the discussions. And I can see we have Mr. Marvin Wamukota. Marvin, maybe you can unmute and say hello to everyone.
Good morning, all of you.
Good morning.
As you've been told, my name is Marvin Wamukota. I'm a regional director, and today I'll be a discussant on the topic that we'll be discussing today, and I'm looking forward towards the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marvin, and welcome. We also have Ms. Salome Oyugi from IBC. Salome, you can just unmute and say hello to everyone.
Good morning, Maureen. My name is Salome Oyugi. As indicated, I work for IBC. I'm an advocate, but employed as manager of political parties and campaign financing at the IBC headquarters. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to very engaging discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salome. We also have Mr. Marcus Agenga from ELOG. Marcus, if you can just unmute and say hello to everyone.
Good morning, everyone, and I hope you're all keeping safe. My name is Marcus Agenga, as indicated by Maureen. I work for the Elections Observation Group as the head of programs. I'm glad to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much, Maureen and the team.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and we're happy to have you again. And our moderator today is going to be Mr. Duncan Haim. But Duncan, if you can hear me, maybe you can unmute and say hello to everyone.
Yes, I can hear you, Maureen. Good morning, everyone, and welcome on board. Let's see how far we will sail in this ocean this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to take us through the participants that we have today, I'm just going to mention a few of us that I can see online, even as we wait for the other participants to join in. Today we're going to have participants who are the county coordinators from these various political parties, which include for Kenya. We'll be having ANC. We will have representatives from NAC Kenya. We also have representatives from LPK. We have Kano Online. We'll have representatives from the Wiper Party. We'll have representatives from the Democratic Party here with us. We have online the representatives from EFP. We have representatives from KNC. We have representatives from PDU and representatives from the FAP party. And we are going to be joined by around 40 of us from the various political parties. And I hope that we are going to continue engaging and providing solutions even as we move forward. So without so much further ado, I'm just going to welcome Mr. Duncan Haemba to just kick off the process of the discussions. Thank you so much, and wish us all good deliberations. Thank you, and welcome, Marcus.
Thank you, Maureen. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have, according to the program, we are supposed to wind up 5 minutes past midday. And not bad, but we shall see how we'll recover some time that we've lost, about 15 minutes. But I don't think we've really lost, because we had said 10 minutes into time. So maybe we are talking about 5 minutes that we will see how we will recover. I would want to wish you all a fruitful deliberation. And just for the record on how we've handled the previous engagements, the discussants will have an opportunity or a relatively allowance share first of all, just to take us through and tell us, give us brief introductions, and then 2-3 areas they would want to talk about in brief. And then once we are done, we'll have the Q&A session. Then if time allows, because they are main discussants, we'll also give them an opportunity to give us closing remarks before we hand over back to Maureen. I think that will be agreeable. And then for purposes of decorum and good deliberation, I would want to plead that when we get the floor, we try to be time conscious. We don't take much time. And in the event that there is a matter you want to raise and somebody else has already canvassed, I would plead that we don't repeat the same, so that we try and cover as much ground as possible. And then you will have, if you want to speak, I will only request that you raise your hand. I'll be able to see you. And then with Maureen, we'll be able to coordinate. We would want to have it as more interactive as possible, because this is a dialogue. It should not be one-way communication. And the previous groups have done extremely well. And I believe that this one will also do extremely well and overshadow the rest. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I would want to give Salome the opportunity, the lady in the house, to go and make a brief introduction about herself. Then we'll also move to Marvin, and then Marcus, the observer. He will have observed what the two will have done, and then we move on that direction. So Salome Oyugi, kindly have the floor.
Thank you, Duncan. As I did indicate earlier, I'm the manager of political parties and campaign financing. I joined the commission in 2009 when the ECK was disbanded. So I have been part and parcel of the reform agenda that has brought the electoral management body to what it is today. As a legal practitioner, my focus from this lens is to regulate the activities of political parties and how their processes impact on the election process as we gear towards the conduct and management of the particular elections. I believe and hope I'll be able to give insight on some of the challenges and issues that have emerged since 2013 and since the dispensation of the new constitution, and what reforms we may want to speak about or dialogue about as we prepare for the 2022 general elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marvin, you've been challenged. She's been very brief to the point. So Marvin, kindly take the floor.
Very true. As indicated, my name is Marvin Wamukota, and in today's discussion, I'll limit myself on the role that political parties actually play when it comes to the election processes. And as I indicated in my opening remarks, I'm a regional director and I've worked closely with political parties. I've been in the midst of 2 general elections, being a key player in terms of managing the general election and also the political parties' primaries. And I'd like to state that according to my understanding, there is no election system that is ever perfect. And for a democratic society, it is very important that we keep on checking. We need to go back and see what happened so that we look for a workable platform that will ensure that our elections are actually free and fair and they are manageable, and we don't have so much chaos that we normally see. And in going forward, maybe I'll focus myself on the quality of leaders or the quality of people that political parties maybe present to the election process, and also check a little bit on how, let's say, our multi-agency system, how if there their system, if they really work, the ESC and the police clearance that we normally get, is it effective in terms of
Yes,
ensuring
Marvin.
that yes, Ndirangu. Let me continue. I said I'll focus myself on the quality of leaders that we produce as political parties to go and compete, which actually informs most of the issues that we have underlying any election that we take. And also, I'll also touch a bit from a political party's angle on the kind of reforms that I personally believe will come in handy to ensure that we have a free and fair election, and we have an election that is not mad with any kind of violence. And my concern will also not be in terms of the legal reform, but also the participation of members, and also the reforms that we need in terms of how our political parties are structured to ensure that we have a free and fair election, free from any kind of violence. Thank you, Duncan. With those opening remarks, let me return back to you.
Thank you. Marcus, as an observer, as always, what could you tell us as a curtain raiser into the discussion?
Thank you very much, Duncan, and the rest of the team. Like I've said before, for those who have just joined, my name is Marcus Agenga. I work for the Elections Observation Group as the head of the programs there. As an observer, of course, as Duncan has noted, we in Kenya, we have had consistently disputed electoral outcomes since 1992. Every electoral cycle has had its own unique disputes. Every of those disputes have led to loss of lives, loss of property, and even displacement of a number of citizens. But of course, elections elections are a celebration of fundamental human rights. So when you celebrate a right and then it makes you cry, it makes you lose a loved one, then that's a big problem. As observers, of course, we have identified eight core issues that have affected our electoral processes and also elections in particular. There are 8, including the issues to do with the trust deficit in a number of institutions and their processes. We have identified some, issues around non-adherence to laws, issues around gaps in the election management, the issue about zero-sum politics in our country, lack of inclusion, high cost of elections, electoral fraud, and the so-called electoral technology. So those issues have continued to somewhat affect the realization of what we would call a credible, peaceful, free, and fair elections in the country. So I hope in this discussion, time allowing, we can be able to unpack some of those issues and agree on some movement towards curing them. Over to you, Duncan.
Thank you, Marcus. And Salome, I'm sure from where you are, from the two, already I've noted a couple of number of heavy issues that I would want us to dwell on as main discussants. And thank God that you've told us you've been a part of the reforms that from IEBC, and then IEBC all the way. So you are an insider, and maybe you will be able to tell us some of these things, why they continue sticking out. And as Marcus has elaborately said, since 1992, we've consistently had disputed elections, and every time they try to fix, or we assume to have fixed, the more the outcome turns to be a nightmare, so to speak, depending on where you stand or your standpoint, because every time the poll agency is always on the receiving end. So when people think that they've finally managed to slay the dragon, again, it leads us to another level. Also, Marvin has raised some of the issues that we do want to see. Marvin, I don't know why you only settled on ESCA and DCI in terms of clearance and IBC, but that is subject to another matter. That is another matter that we'll want to know whether you would want to amend your statement and add IBC on it in terms of clearance of candidates and also in terms of the reforms. But let me start with you, Marvin. As a regional coordinator for Jubilee Party, and in terms of the reforms
Yes,
that you'd want to be envisaged as a party, Jubilee, what are some of these reforms that your party has put in place, bearing in mind that as it stands, there's a near crisis in the party, in that when the party wanted to discipline what they call errand members, it came out with the realization that we don't have bona fide officials, for the simple reason that when the party was formed, we've had acting officials that were to go for 3 years. Then we've not had substantive elections that would put substantive officials. And therefore, when it comes to other party organs, like the National Delegates Conference and all that, we really don't have the grounds that we can say these are the bona fide party officials, because what we've been having are interim officials. And this is not only a problem at domicile at Jubilee, because from the previous engagements, the only party that has tried or has attempted to do election of parties is ODM, and they can't even take that credit much because they only attempted in 2014, and that is it. So this problem, all parties, of course, have now gotten a reprieve by citing COVID, that they could not put their house in order. Because you remember the issue of ANC, they also said that when they were just about to do their elections, COVID hit. And of course, everybody is taking cover under COVID. So tell us, when you say the party reforms, your party to start with, as a regional coordinator, what do you think needs to have been done?
Thank you, Duncan. And maybe just to restrict myself to matters election, I know, succession politics, especially to a ruling party, is an emotive issue, and it always whip a lot of emotion when it comes to who is next, will become next. So in terms of the reforms within the party, we all understand the processes within our parties from the time of how parties even monitor the election. This is a very expensive process, and just ensuring that you understand what actually went on in a general election. And I'll begin by saying, yes, our elections are always marred with violence, and not only during the general election. So we may want to blame IBC so much, but even in our primaries, we would normally face a lot of disputes when it comes to party primaries. But one thing of concern that is even notable in Jubilee is the way we've been able to even handle the systems and processes and the committees that we've set within the party structures to be able to handle disputes are actually beyond reproach, and they can't be influenced in whatsoever means. So these are some of the things that maybe political parties need to be keen, and also being able to analyze and relook and have a post-election evaluation of every center within our political system. One of the key reform that I am sure it will work better, especially for most political parties, during the last election, we had to run a parallel questionnaire in all the polling stations just to understand the processes, what issues arose during the voting process, and how we can best handle. Because in most of the time, we may want to distance ourselves with the polling officials, but they're actually our brothers and sisters who are in charge of these processes. And for political parties actually to raise aspersion in any electoral process, you really need to have been there and gone through whatever happens in a polling station. And I want to make reference, like, when you compare the last general election, the 2017 general election compared to the 2013 one, we actually saw that there was a rise in polling stations from 31,000 to around 40,000 polling station. This means that the resources required by political parties to have agents in all these political parties actually goes up. And this financial or resource hindrance is a very big issue when it comes to us, even political parties, raising tangible aspersion as to how these processes are being done. It really informs, because due to that, I'll want to point out that some of the reforms that the party is actually undergoing or undertaking, despite the issues that you've raised in terms of not having officials in place, but within the people currently in office and within their mandate, they have been able to critically look into the past election and point out the issues that were critical. And these are data that you can actually borrow. I hope most political parties check on how they performed during an election and just try to see going forward what are the areas that they did not meet, and where areas that they can actually work to improve it. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much. And Salome, the issue of clearance, why is it that EACC and the police, they seem to be getting it wrong, but at the end of the day, people want to know what is the role of IEBC, because ultimately it is the institution that clears the candidates.
Thank you, Marcus. The issue of clearance and with respect to issues of leadership and integrity actually has been a thorn for quite a long time. As you recall, in 2013, administration of the Leadership Act was purely within the precinct of IEBC. That was before we amended the Elections Act. But with the reforms that came post-2013 and the establishment of EACC, then it was felt that the Leadership and Integrity Act was best administered by EACC. It therefore means that at the point of clearing candidates or registering candidates for elections, in terms of the language used in the Elections Act, there is an interplay of various agencies. There is a role to be done by EACC, there is a role to be done by IEBC, the police and the judiciary, where convictions are to be meted out. Now, there is a gap in terms of how the four institutions operate. In 2017, we tried to provide some kind of working framework where we internally informed a leadership and integrity vetting committee of the IEBC. And through that framework, we were then able to bring on board the Office of the Attorney General, the EACC, the police, and the Judicial Committee of Elections. The purpose behind this framework was so that we could leverage on any information that the other institutes have before we get into registration and clearance of candidates. Now, what we did at that time was to forward names of candidates whose names have been given to us. The benefit of that were the amendments of Section 31 of the Elections Act, which now require political parties, before even they go into primaries, they present to us a list of candidates that are going to participate in the primaries. So we took that window to forward these names to EACC so they could run background check on us. But we have since realized that for us to get that right, we need more time. The timelines in between a submission of list of aspirants, party primaries, and finally the registration of candidates did not give EACC enough time to actually run through all this. But we always start somewhere. And we saw an improvement from what we had in 2013. I believe you all recall the list of 77 names that the EACC forwarded to us. And based on evident convictions, then we were able to bar certain candidates. But we are also alive to the provisions of Article 99.3 that candidates often run to, that allows, that bars us from disqualifying candidates until all appeals or reviews of decisions made or sentences issued have been exhausted. Now therein lies the catch. So we find our hands tied and we are forced to clear these candidates. I think we should be looking at changing timelines and working on how we can be able to draw synergy within our timelines and that of political parties.
Thank you, Marcus. The changing of timelines, do you buy that as an observer, as an election observer?
Duncan, sorry, I got a little bit disconnected at some point. What timelines are we talking about for the political parties?
Salome is of the opinion that in trying to address some of these issues, that the changing timelines, that I don't know at what point you exactly lost the conversation, or maybe Salome, you can take that again briefly.
Salome, yeah.
Allow me to clarify. There is a process that is undertaken before parties are able to select their candidates. And it would help if the party processes in some extent emulated that of the commission processes. What do I mean by this? When you look at the manner in which certain political parties undertake their party primaries, those that we've been able to go through actually have tight mechanisms. Marvin's party is one of them, where they actually ask their aspirants to present these clearance forms from the Leadership and Integrity Act. Now, if such a candidate is already cleared at the party level, then you have cleaner, for lack of a better word, cleaner candidates moving up and up the ladder. Now, what I meant by timelines was we may need to revisit Section 31 so that we are able to give political parties more time to clear their candidates before the list comes to IEBC. That is one angle. We may, in the alternative, prescribe an earlier time for political party primaries and IEBC nominations, so that by the time of registering candidates for the elections, we have given the EACC a lot of time to go into the vetting process of these particular candidates. That is the timeline that I was speaking of.
Okay.
Do we expand time at the political party primary level, or do we expand the time between party primaries and submission of names of candidates to the IEBC?
All right. Thank you, Salome. I think I get it now. And I want to agree with Salome, because even as ELOG, we have identified that as a big issue. And we had proposed that we need to consider increasing the timelines of conducting party primaries, at least 6 months, before the general elections are called, because we feel that if parties have enough time to be able to conduct their own internal processes, including the party primaries, then it allows and gives other bodies enough time to also do their part. what we have seen in the country is that everyone waits until the last minute. So you have political parties having their primaries towards the end, the tail end of the timeline provided. That puts pressure on a number of institutions, including the IEBC, the ORPP, a number of institutions that are regulating or working with the parties. That pressure that comes as a result of last-minute activities is a deterrent to a process that should actually be subjected to public scrutiny as well as accountable to the people. So we, on our part, Salome, we've taken the second option, what we've called in the alternative. So we have taken the second option, and we've asked that, and this is a presentation we made to JLAC about 2 weeks ago, that we need to consider to increase the timelines of conducting party primaries because of simple fact that a number of other bodies that are concerned require equally enough time to be able to speak to those processes that have taken place. So I agree that we need to consider enlarging that time frame towards the party primaries. And of course, even increase considerations being made, should we even need to stagger party primaries? Do we also need to think of creating, rather than having national election boards conducting party primaries, do you think we need to have elections, the county, to create county election boards to be able to have those processes conducted within those counties and managed within those counties? We have been considering all those options as a result of what we have witnessed before. Thank you.
Thank you. But Salome and Marcus, what about the laws that we have in place? Yes, they'll call for an amendment, and it's a good suggestion or the option or the alternative. But remember that we have laws that guide. For instance, those civil servants that are still in office, there is a particular timeline that they are supposed to remain in office until when they should now resign in order to seek elective positions. If we are going to say amend the time for doing the primaries, then allow the relevant bodies to now vet the candidates or investigate the track record of the candidates, how do we maneuver? Because will that not amount to a situation of digging one hole to fill the other? And I think Marcus will go and then Salome briefly.
Well, I agree. I mean that question was raised, and we felt it was an important question to be raised. However, we felt that you're looking at the broader picture. You're looking at the overall good of such an amendment and the good it's able to bring about. So if you, for instance, if you're working for a government institution or some of those other institutions that will require you to resign ahead of time, we feel that that shouldn't prevent us from creating provisions within the law that serve the common good. So we don't see it. We don't see it as it were a way that prohibits or makes other people unhappy. But we think that this provision serves the greater good and brings sanity to the party processes.
Thank you. Before Salome, you come in, let me go to Marvin. Marvin, as a politician or holding brief for your party in your capacity as a regional coordinator, do you think that is in one way part of the solution if they were to vary the duration that party primaries should be done, staggered, so to speak? Of course, we had ODM in our previous engagement had requested for like up to 6 months, of course, arguing that they are the biggest, the second largest party in the country.
That will be a solution, but also it has its own challenges considering our democratic space and our election processes. And you've earlier on alluded on in terms of the regulation that is there as to how early somebody is supposed to resign from their position for them to be able to vie, and at what point will at the point that parliament is dissolved, so that even the incumbents can even go to defend their position. That is always a challenge, but at times I normally look at it, yes, we may require more time, but time does not necessarily speaks to the quality of the processes that is supposed to be laid down. For example, if somebody knows that is going to vie for an elective position, despite whatever capacity or position that you are serving in the country, it's so easy for you to start the processes of making sure that you are cleared by EACC. So maybe time can be in terms of how early is it required for somebody to get clearance from EACC, because if one of the factor that actually hinder this, that is an issue when it comes to time, is the discipline, the party discipline in terms of the politicians discipline parties. This timing has not been a success because people always want that window open, so that when they are aggrieved from one party, they can easily switch to another party or go to independent or vie in an election independently. So all these timing issues speaks to how credible even our processes are within the party. Because when you talk of even time that we require to do primaries, there is a stipulated time upon which we need to have resolved our internal dispute before it can even overflow to the political parties dispute tribunal and even end up in courts. In courts. But besides that, Marcus had mentioned of use of county election boards in some of these processes, so that we decentralize the pressure that is always at the top. You know, most political parties run their primaries from their headquarters. And there is a very big possibility of all this happening at the county level through the county election board. And this is something that will easily work out for most political parties, because decentralizing that pressure will make sure even parties are able to do credible primaries that without so much pressure, because if each county can handle the logistics for their primaries and just have everything settled at that level, it reduces pressure from the top. And maybe speaking of reforms, this is something that Jubilee Party has been trying in these by-elections, just having to empower our counties to be able to sort out a nomination process and bring whatever candidate that has undergone the due process as stipulated in our constitution, such that after they have gone through that, they can only be submitted to IBC. And it has worked out well, I can say, despite the other common grievances that are always there because of our nature of election. Because in some regions, the way we run our politics, it is always perceived, if you have a ticket from a certain political party, you are as good as a representative for that particular region in the parliament or county assembly. So such are the issues that has actually taken us back. But if such things are looked into, we will go a long way in ensuring that our parties submit a credible list to IBC for further clearance. And in finishing, it will be not correct to speculate at this particular point, in terms of the suggestions that are coming from the Building Bridges Initiative constitutional amendment and election amendments, where even political parties are required to give a well-balanced party list to IBC, which is a well gender-balanced party list to IBC. This even complicates further when you talk of timing that is required, because this poses a challenge to political parties on how they'll be able to achieve a gender-balanced party list, given that in any election people look at the strength of individual candidates in whatever region and not necessarily the gender. Thank you, Duncan. Back to you.
Thank you, Marvin. Salome, kindly allow me to pass. To skip you, because I would want Marcus. There's a question by Sahara Rashid. She says that maybe we need to address a bit the issues on the around negotiated democracy and the law regarding election laws. There are regions that practice this, and remember that not everyone in a political party will agree with this or okays it. Is that an affront, a threat to the very democracy that the country or political parties would claim to be perpetuating? And then from there, I'll take two and double questions to Salome. So Marcus, briefly, the concern on this issue on negotiated democracy.
Thank you, Duncan. I think this is a growing debate, a growing concern in some parts of our country, where either elders sit together, some leaders or opinion leaders sit together and decide for the rest of the team. And whether the question we ask ourselves, are we abusing democracy? Is it an abuse? Is it an affront to democracy or not? That question, the debate is still out there, but this is just my opinion. At the center of democratic principle is the right to choose, the power that comes with your own political determination. And that power can be exercised either directly through yourself or through someone else who represents you. Now, some people have argued that in areas where negotiated democracy is practiced, the mwananchi has allowed them to speak on their behalf, has allowed them to give directions on their behalf. So they're arguing that it's no different from parliamentarians voting on your own behalf. So they're saying our elders, we have transferred our power to choose, we have conferred our interests and political direction to our leaders. So when they speak for me, they speak for us. So somehow trying to justify that. So I don't know. Personally, I think we need to allow citizens to make that choice and avoid as many layers as possible. In any case, it happens everywhere. It happened. We saw it in Migori County between the Luos and Kuria. We've seen it in a number of other counties in the northeastern counties where the guys negotiate for positions. While I agree that in negotiations, consensus are at the heart of democracy, but what happens to the voice of the minority who might dissent? So, I don't know. Personally, I don't know what to say, but I would just simply say that I would personally discourage such sort of discussion, such sort of debates, while also taking into account that those who are for it are arguing that the residents, that those citizens have conferred on their leaders the power to choose for them. So it's still a very divisive discussion, divisive debate, and we'll see how this ends.
divisive discussion, divisive debate, divisive democracy, maybe, maybe not. Salome, as IEBC, I would want you to tell us whether this kind of arrangement sort of complicates matters in as much as it's not upon you to decide, it's the players, but from where you sit and in your capacity, in your individual capacity as an advocate, and of course, I believe a champion of democracy. And then you'll tie that at the tail end of that, James Onsarigo, of course, this to everyone, saying the fake academic credentials, it's the one that is activating poll violence. How comes the holders get clearance to the poll? And then I'm looking, okay, all right, go take that one first.
Thank you, Duncan. Allow me to first speak on the issues you had raised with respect to how we amend the laws if we want to increase the timelines for party primaries and how it affects every other process. Now that is the challenge we have in electoral laws amendment. Parliament has a tendency to engage in piecemeal legislative amendments, and it has created the ambiguities that we are now facing in the electoral process. To achieve what we are proposing, we'll of course be looking at the entire Elections Act in entirety, so that we are able to relate every timeline with another. So of course, if we increase that period for party primaries, we will also go back to Section 43. This is the one that addresses the period when a public servant should resign. Currently, it says 6 months before a general election, and for a by-election, 7 days after declaration of the vacancy. We'll be able to relate that to the process and the period for party primaries. So I don't think it's a challenge, and I agree with Marcus. We should be able to find some kind of semblance in all the party process activities. That said and done, we cannot also negate the decision that was made, the Eric Cheriot case. It is something that we have now been forced to study, even as we engage in electoral law reform. You recall this was a Kericho case where teachers went to court on the argument that it is against the principles of Article 38 of the Constitution to force somebody to resign. Given the party politics, the choices of the electorate or party members, and so they felt it was unfair to force someone to resign, because then what do they have to fall back to? While a specific decision was made to cushion the teachers, there is a dicta that we are now resonating with, even as we amend our electoral laws. And the judge then, in his own wisdom, had ruled that public officers should then resign after nominations. Now, the question before us was, which nominations was the judge referring to? Do we ask these candidates to resign after the party primaries, with hindsight that now you're the actual candidate of the party, and so it is clear you're going for elections? Or did he mean at the point of registration by the commission, because chances are you may not even pass through that particular stage? It is a discussion we are having as lawyers and electoral experts, because it has an impact on Section 43. And we may have to now review 43 with respect to that decision. This relates with the push by ODM and other quarters on why don't we amend our laws and give political parties more time to conduct their primaries. Again, I raise issue with our piecemeal amendments. Previously, the law was providing for 120 days. But I'm also urging us, even as we appreciate the electoral process, we must at every time do not read sections in isolation. Every section is related to another. When you look at Section 13 of the Elections Act, it gives political parties a lot of time. Political parties are supposed to are given the leeway to conduct party primaries at least 90 days to a general election. When you come down and read Section 14 and 31(2)(a) which then speaks to the initiation of a presidential election, and when political parties are supposed to bring names of their candidates to the commission, then it speaks of 60 days. Nothing stops a political party from starting their party primaries even before the commission has gazetted the election day, because Section 14 tells the commission to gazette the election day 60 days to that election. Yet you have 13 allowing parties to conduct their party primaries 90 days to the election. So it's an interplay of timelines, and that's why I keep going back to the timelines issues. Once we get the timelines right, then we will be able to have a seamless election process. Now back to the issue of negotiated democracy. In my view, as an election practitioner and as a lawyer, I think the place of negotiated democracy in elections is not sound, because at the onset, it appears to infringe on the Article 38 rights. How do you balance negotiated democracy and the rights of citizens to choose the candidates of their own choice? While it has been achieved in certain areas of Kenya, in fact, recently in Garissa, we had to gazette a declaration of no contest because they agreed amongst themselves that this was their preferred candidate. It happens once in a while. And if it does not border on infringing on those rights, then well and good. But from a scholarly aspect, it negates the whole basis of political democracy or democracy in politics. Fake academic credentials, like I said, there are a number of enforcement agencies that are involved in an electoral process. And when it comes to academic qualifications, there's only so much that a returning officer down there in Kabuchai or Matungu or Isiolo can tell, other than what you present to them. And this is why we engage the EACC. Remember, in the leadership and integrity form, you're also declaring your educational qualification. So at that point, you have declared whether you actually hold that degree or that certificate. The same degree certificate that you're presenting to IBC. Now, what the electoral law provides as a safeguard is that this is a certificate that must then be certified by the Commission of Higher Education in the event of a university degree, to the extent of also affirming aspects or incidences where the degree has been acquired outside of Kenya. And also for national examinations, we know the body that we go to. On that basis, a candidate will bring the certificate to IBC certified. Now we know we live in Kenya, corruption is rife, and there's a possibility that someone may have forged a certificate, forged a stamp, but we are not forensic experts. So unfortunately, from our desk, we are unable to ascertain that. But that does not stop a citizen, a registered voter, who has issue with that qualification or with that certificate. Now, should that happen at the point of the candidate presenting his certificate to IBC, then that registered voter, it must be a registered voter, then has a right to file a complaint with IBC. And then Section 74 of the Elections Act kicks in. The IBC's Dispute Resolution Committee will sit down and address the issue. At that point, we are allowed to invite institutions of higher learning or the accredited bodies to ascertain the validity of these certificates. But short of that, we would clear the candidate if no issues have been raised. On the other hand, if EACC raise an issue based on the leadership and on the form that the candidate has filled, then we are equally able to arrest the situation at that particular juncture. I hope I've answered well, Duncan.
Fair enough. Marvin, in your opening remarks, among the issues that you said you'd want to engage on or apply your mind on, the kind of reforms that might guarantee free and fair elections. And Marcus seems to have picked your mind of course, prior to that, because he also enlisted about 8 core issues that he's been able to place his finger on that maybe they need to be addressed. Among them was the issue of non-adherence to the law and gaps in election management. So, Marvin, could you tell us, on your own motion, the kind of reforms that might guarantee free and fair elections? Why are political parties not, first of all, adhering to the law by ensuring that they do credible party election for officials first at that level before we even embark on the chaotic primaries, nominations during primaries, by-election, the exercise during the by-election and the general election? Why are political parties simply not adhering to the law?
Thank you, Duncan. First, I want to tie all this issue into how our political parties are funded and the resources available for them actually to achieve some of the democratic requirement or legal requirement that they need to undertake. You'll find running an election, especially even the party officials election, is a very expensive exercise. Doing that across the country requires a lot of financial muscles, and to some extent there has been perception that the fee that people pay to a political party, it actually matches the budget to do such activities, which has not been the case so far. In most cases, you'll find that mismatch of what they actually have, the financial resources or the financial muscles within a political party. And even it goes down to who is funding, or where does a political party get its funds from. You'll find most political parties will have other priorities in terms of how they want to grow their political parties. And in most cases, the principle and the underlying narrative that we've always have, it is most political parties always sees it's not realistic to mend something that is not broken. If you have a system that is currently working, why do you want to even interfere with it? And this is the basis upon which most political parties operate on, and they have been able to attain whatever they have attained so far with regard to enriching and even strengthening our political parties, because we all understand our political parties as institutions. They are far from being the institutions that is envisioned in the Political Parties Act and in other ideal operations of a political party. But besides that, when we talk of reforms that will ensure we have a free and credible election, this goes even to the knowledge or ignorance of some of the political players, because it is very critical that from the position of aspirants to political parties, you really need to understand the data that is there in terms of the number of registered voters, so that you understand when you say the election is rigged, you can compare it against something that you know. And when you say that you need to have agents to monitor an election in whatever process, you need to know how many do you need to install in terms of the number of streams that you have, how many you require, under what rotation are they supposed to operate. And you know, at times this thing is hindered by the errors of data that we receive from IEBC. This is a very critical issue, and this alludes to most of the time when you hear a political key player says that election was rigged. In most cases, they cast aspersions not because they have tangible, credible data that they can point to. And until to date, some people, you'll ask them how how a certain election was carried out, they'll not credibly tell you how it was run. But besides that, the knowledge that political parties require, or political aspirants need to be able to credibly engage when it comes to even an election petition, or casting aspersions as to how an election was carried out, and if it was free and fair, goes down to the data that is available to them, to what they can point out, and to what they have observed. And all this is a nightmare to most political parties, because of the resources available to them to be able to substantively be able to run and clearly tell that if an election was there was a mismatch or disparity in most of the issues. And this has subjected us political players to relying on third parties like the observers and even the media. And in case where there is a misreporting or misrepresentation, this actually aggravates and makes the issue even worse off. And this is what accounts to most of the political violence that we normally see in cases where there are high stakes in an election. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Marvin. I was really itching to have Marcus take give a reaction on that, as well as Salome. But I'm looking at the number of participants. We've hit 31, and we have like an hour to go. So with your indulgence, I would plead that we leave it at that, and then we open the floor for the other participants to also field questions, because this is a dialogue. We were not preaching to them. Now that we turn the mic, pass it to the floor. There are three gentlemen. They've signed in with an OPPO. Now there are two. I would really love to hear them say something. Yes, I can see they're looking at each other. I don't know who they are, but I would just want them to give us a comment. I love it. I love it the way you people are following this particular conversation. There were three, one left. Now I can see there are two. I don't know whether you can hear me. Gentlemen who've logged in under OPPO, when I look at the participants, is just under OA. I don't know who they are. I'm suggesting that we open the floor for other members now to field questions, to shoot questions, to allow our discussants field them as well, if that is agreeable, ladies and gentlemen.
It is agreeable.
Thank you very much. Now that you have fired, you've cocked your gun first, I would allow you to kindly go ahead and release the trigger. Kindly shoot.
Thank you, Duncan. Johnny Moite, the National Chairman, Kenya National Congress. I'll just put in my 2 cents on the issue about the conduct of elections and what normally ensues, because we have had elections for a number of years, multi-party elections, that is, and we've always ended up with some form of dispute or other, chaos. And when it gets worse, of course, we have violence, even deaths. My thought is this, and I should say that it was very well captured by Marcus when he talked about the issues that he said they have isolated, which usually impact the elections negatively. One of them, which I would pick, is the one he referred to as the deficit of trust. I should say, and this would be known to all of us, that whenever we go into an election, or when we are getting ready for one, like there's going to be one in 2022, we have a big problem. We have a big problem where, institutions that are charged with managing elections in this country, if you are to do a poll or ask Kenyans whether they trust them to give them a result they believe in, they trust, there would most likely be a problem with that. A good number of Kenyans could easily tell you that they don't trust institutions that manage elections in this country. Because again, you look at how we do it, you look at how we behave after elections, especially the recent ones. Duncan, you have cases where people at very senior levels of leadership in this country give you a message, their body language, even things they say. It's like an open admission that there was a problem with the election. That the result that was declared wasn't quite the one, and that sort of thing. So for me, we need to fix this one way or another, so that when people prepare to go into an election, they can trust that the outcome, even if someone were to lose, would be an outcome they would want to say, yeah, I lost and lost fairly. But as it is right now, and I speak as someone who has taken part in elections, and I'm going to take part in an election next year. Duncan, you would not believe what people I could call my supporters are telling me, other than doing the normal stuff about getting ready for this election, paperwork and things. You're also being told, we don't want to play soft with this election. We have to be prepared for this and that other eventuality. So what are they saying? As a candidate, of course, I tell them, no, we have to do these things right. But they would tell you, we have to do things like other people do. So Duncan, for me, let me not take so much time. The institutions that manage our elections in this country, I don't know what it is they have to do, but something needs to be done. So much. And I think political parties have a part to play, the leadership have a part to play, the media, of course, and the rest of the people. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Salome and Marcus, please just take down some of the issues that you might be required to address as an observer, as one of the election managers. So let me yield the mic to Brian Githinji from Kenya, and then Jameson Sarigo. If we can try to keep them a bit short in the presentation, I'll appreciate, so that we also have time, the main discussants who are the main, let me call them major stakeholders on this particular dialogue, so that they can also respond to some of these issues. So I'll appreciate. Brian Githinji from Kenya, kindly take the floor.
Okay, I would like to say good morning to the entire panel. My question is, every election year, we have been talking about election reforms. They normally say that it's only a fool who keeps doing the same thing and expecting the different results. So for now, I would ask, how can we really make sure that we reform the political parties? Because from my end, what I see as a problem is, one, political parties, and second, having the government of the day controlling an organization which calls themselves an independent electoral body. So that is one. Second, I would ask, we are seeing issues in places like Juja, where we have one party can campaign, the other party can't campaign. We saw the other in Matungu, where we saw an IEBC officer being frog marched, nothing happened. So really, how can we really have the IEBC that we really want, and we stop looking so much into the processes in terms of how somebody becomes a candidate, but how the elections are conducted in a free and fair manner? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for keeping it short. On Sarigo, the challenge, the honors is on you.
Well, mine still goes to IBC, and my question still remains, how is IBC relating to our intelligence agencies? Because we have heard like, if it's the issue of academic credentials, then we have our intelligence around. Does IBC really link up to the intelligence officers before we get to prove? Because I believe if somebody in the village, everybody knows we are 10 candidates, and this person does not come from heaven. Everybody knows how this person has grown, how he has acquired his education. Then, I mean, it takes a long time, and it seems like people want it to happen so that, well, if you complain, you go to court. Then during that time, and people know very well that the person here who is running, definitely they know does not have the credentials. You don't expect the voters not to turn violent. So my big question here is, how does IBC relate with the intelligence issue? Thank you.
Thank you. Take your hand down. Thank you very much. Marcus, I would want you to tackle the question raised by, one of the questions raised by Brian Gedenji from NAC Kenya, that election reforms every election cycle. Only a fool can do things repeatedly the same manner, expecting a different result. And then we will, it seems like Salome, you have quite a couple of questions, and these issues on vetting or clearance of candidates still coming back to you. You explained that was taken away from you, but as I said out there, people know that it is IEBC that ultimately gives the green light for aspirants, turning them into candidates to participate. So Marcus, kindly.
Thank you very much, Duncan and the rest of the team. I just want to say a few things. One is that it is just prudent for any organization, for any institution, for any individual, that after the completion of an exercise, you conduct some sort of an evaluation of that particular process and see what worked well, what didn't work well, what can be improved to make the process even better. Because we as human beings, we always seek for perfection. We always seek for what is good. So reform in itself is not a bad idea. So even when the country expects, and of course, elections, as you all know, elections is not an event. It is not what happens on the 8th of August. Election is a process where every phase speaks to each other, so that a collapse of one of the phases directly affects the efficacy, affects the nature and performance of the next phase of an election. So reform is a good thing to do. However, as has been noted, every electoral cycle, we speak of reforms. We speak of reforms. No reforms, no elections. If you remember those sort of conversations we had before. But I want to single out a number of things. There is what we call bad manners. I just want to say that up front. Bad manners, we just have bad manners. Some things don't even require IB. I mean, that doesn't require IBC or political party leaders or the office of the registrar of political parties. For instance, you know that you don't have a university degree, yet you go to River Road, fake that paper and bring it and submit it for to vie. You know that already. You know that is bad, and it is unjust to beat up your neighbor because of politics. You know that is bad to cheat during an election. You know it. So, I mean, it's just bad manners. I mean, at some point, and that bad manners can be cured by legislating. You can't legislate against, I mean, so that guys can be good manners. You can try to put safeguards, but bad manners is essentially a moral question. You ask yourself, can I do what I'm doing? Is it a good thing to do, regardless of laws that are put in place? or not. So that, I think that's what I want to just say, that reforms is a good thing, and we always must seek to reform our systems, reform our institutions. But the reform that is most needed is our own reforms as a people, that we cultivate good political culture that goes against the bad manners that we have as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Salome. If you can take it from where Marcus has left, you have quite a couple of questions. And there's this perception about government control over independent bodies that was also raised by Agidenji. And then the lack of unleveled playing field in Juja. What is turning out is not what is expected. And then Matungu, we had this discussion, and to him where he stands, that justice has not been delivered to that IEBC official. Did the agency look the other way around, or what is it that is at play? And then, of course, there were issues that were also raised by Onsarigo on the issue of IEBC not seemingly reading from the same page with the intelligence organs. If you can keep it a bit short, I'll appreciate, because I know you'll be repeating some of these things, but of course we are having a dialogue. So if somebody didn't get it right and they ask the question, we have the honors of attending to them. That is the essence of why we are in a democracy and why this is a dialogue. From there, I'll be able to pick Phineas Mugalo and Bisher. So Salome, kindly.
Thank you, Duncan. I'll start up with Onsarigo's concerns. And I want to start there, because I see from the wall that questions have been raised on that as well. Let me reiterate what I said earlier. It is not that the IEBC does not do a background check. The IEBC does background checks to the extent possible and to the extent within our capabilities. And it is for that reason that we established a collaboration framework between ourselves, the EACC, the DPPP, and national police, including the JCE. Now, before we register candidates for elections, as Onsarigo has rightly said, voters know these candidates. And many a times, they will get wind that a candidate is trying to present fake credentials or aspire through a fake background. IBC receives those complaints. And when we receive a complaint of this nature, we wait for the candidate, because now we've been alerted that this candidate has this and this issue. In so doing, we also reach out to EACC, we reach out to the DPP, depending on the nature of malpractice or offense that has been tied to a particular candidate, and we await their feedback. Often, and I did speak to the issue of timelines, often you find a situation where allegations have been made, but the matter has not been concluded. And that is where Article 99(4) then binds the hands of the Commission. But where we receive complaints, and in our collaboration efforts with the EACC and DPP in particular, we are able to arrest some of these malpractices or fake certificates, as one of the participants has put forth. While still on the issue of education, someone has equally asked, why degree for MCAs? Now, this is a discussion we had with Parliament right from 2013 general elections. And at that time, as IBC, we had actually proposed a diploma for MCAs. There are certain quarters of reforms, I'm sure Marcus remembers, who even went lower to postgraduate or post-secondary qualifications. But Parliament's argument was, MCAs are very critical people. Remember, these are the people who can sit and impeach a governor. And they asked themselves, or they put it to us, if a governor is required to have a degree and the MCAs do not meet such qualification, yet they have the power to impeach such a governor, do you see an anomaly in that? Of course, there were arguments for and against that, and this is where we are now. And Parliament put their foot down and decided to provide for degree for all elected persons. And this now also ties to anybody who is nominated under the party list for the 2022 general elections. KNC chair, yes, trust in elections. Let me say, given the democracy levels in Kenya and Africa at large, trust in elections has become very expensive. And I think that is why Kenya pushed for technology in elections, with the hope that we would then remove much of the management processes of results and results tallying and transmission from personnel, human beings, and put it through a visible mechanism as the technologies we have put in place. All in all, I agree we all have a responsibility. And as the former Attorney General once said, as every person or entity reads the Constitution, you must be able to pull out your responsibility. Chapter 7 is not for IBC alone. There are very many organizations who have responsibilities and roles within Chapter 7. But we all note our deficiencies in one way or the other. And as we engage in the reform processes, even as an institution, we are looking to restructure the institution and empower the constitution, the institution, in areas where we are lacking. To NAC Kenya, reforms are necessary, as Marcus has mentioned. It's part of our electoral cycle, and from where we sit as IBC. After every election, we have to be able to assess what worked and what didn't work well. And sometimes we then find ourselves in a constant loop of amending electoral laws. And this time we are even proposing, why don't we just overhaul the entire electoral legal framework and start from scratch? Because with the piecemeal amendments, it then becomes difficult to relate each legislation with the other. Particularly with political parties, we have made effort under the auspices of the Registrar of Political Parties, where we've been able to, through a task force that brings on board every government entity or agency that has a role to play in conduct of party primaries and ultimately elections, we are developing a framework on the process by which political parties conduct primaries. And we are hoping we'll be able to arrest some of the challenges that emanate directly from party primaries. We need to appreciate that in certain aspects, if we don't get party primaries right, then it is a spillover to the actual election processes. I want to dispute the issue that nothing has been done in Matungu. We took this very seriously as an EMB. For those who are watching the news, the chairman did in fact issue a press conference, and we are currently conducting investigations towards prosecution with the office of the DCI. You may, for those who do not know, under the Directorate of Legal, the Commission has a fully fledged investigation and prosecution unit. So we are working hand in hand with the DCI, and of course the culprits will be brought to book. The Electoral Code of Conduct is key in how we will manage elections, and it's a matter of how do we empower all the enforcement all the enforcement entities, even the office of the Registrar of Political Parties, because even as we speak now, before the election period, every political party is bound to the Political Parties Code of Conduct that has a raft of tenets that are based on constitution and political tolerance. And maybe it's time we empowered some of these enforcement agencies beyond the measures we have now. Campaigns in Juja, I am not aware. I will not purport to know that certain quarters have been stopped from doing campaigns. Maybe it is something I can pick from here, and so that the Commission can do something about it on the ground. But we do have laws that govern the conduct of campaigns, and the returning officer did issue campaign schedules to all the candidates. And these campaign schedules are also shared with the National Police, so that at any time there's tolerance and we don't have interference from one quarter on another person's campaign. So from where I sit, I believe the campaign schedule is being adhered to. But if there are issues that we may need to address as an EMB, I will bring it before the right quarters. Thank you.
Salome is not aware. I'm sure that is a genuine point. Is not the normal. She's not aware of goings on in Juja, but I believe her. When you look at her, you can be sure she's saying the truth. Thank you, Salome, for that. Phineas Mugalo, briefly kindly be brief. We have yourself, we have Bisher, and then we have Harrison John. So in that order, kindly ask your question.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Mugalo Phineas, the ANC headquarters, in charge of ICT department. I wish to thank everybody who has made it possible for us to have this meeting. Now, I'll only touch on some, which I think somebody has mentioned somewhere. What has disturbed our system in terms of how we run our electoral process? Historical issues. Historical issues where, of course, because of what has happened in the previous elections, the mistakes that have been done in the previous elections will always trigger that kind of feeling that the same thing may present itself again in the following one. And that suspicion is the one which causes also a lot of problems as we head towards the general elections. Apart from that, we have the issue of funding. If you observe now currently, we have only 2 political parties in this country which are funded from the register of political party. And that means that the parties are actually starved of financial resources that can enable them carry out a number of processes or activities that should take place. And this has made it possible for parties to be wrongly owned. Parties are supposed to be owned by the citizens. But if you observe critically, you realize that most of our parties in this country are individually owned. And because of that, once that kind of scenario arises, you'll not expect to have a credible nomination free of course, biasness in any given circumstance. So from my take, I really ask, especially those brothers of ours who are especially at the register of political party, and in terms of how parties are funded, that issue to be looked into so that at least parties can get enough resources to carry out a number of activities that we are mentioning here in terms of proper nominations, proper governance in our respective parties. Because after all, the country is governed through these political parties. So if you have wrongly set up political parties, then of course you expect wrong governance also in the country. So that was my observation, and I really wish those 2 things to be looked into by the respective forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Mugalo. You can take your hand down. Bisher, I saw you moving. I don't know whether you've settled. Salam alaikum. Juma Karim, please have the floor. Bisher, unmute your mic. I can't hear you. Unmute your mic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Khaimba. I think you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you. And I said Juma Karim.
Juma Karim. I'm Bisher from Mombasa, representing Kanu Party, Secretary Mombasa County. I was having a question, or maybe I say an idea I wanted to share with the IBC, that because we always, wananchi have been complaining about the credibility of elections. Immediately after election, so many things comes up. I was thinking if IBC will think on a way of having, like in health, we say community health workers, then does IBC have a plan to introduce maybe an introduction of poll workers that they can allow voluntary wananchi to participate in seeing the election, not like observers bodies, just individual wananchi in that particular area or during an election. Does IBC have such like plans to help wananchi have faith on that? Thank you very much. Only that.
Thank you, Bashir. Harrison, kindly, and then Josephine. Harrison seems not to be ready. Are you there, Josephine?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, proceed.
Hello.
Yes, good afternoon,
Oh, it's
proceed.
morning, it's not even noon.
Oh yeah, not yet noon. Thank you. Not yet noon, proceed.
Yes, I'm Josephine Cheruta from Wazinigishu. Me? Hello?
Yes, continue.
Yes. So I'm saying with our elections in Kenya, you know, when you want to do something, you start from the grassroots. And the grassroots is the primaries of the political parties. Realize that people are not comfortable with the primaries of the parties. And that is why you realize that in 2017, there were many candidates standing with an independent ticket because people were not, the elections of the parties were not fair. And that is why people opted to go for these seats with independent ticket. And we realize that we have those who are elected. We have governors, we have senators, we have even meaning that with Kenyans now, they are more enlightened and they will not be dictated again. They'll choose whoever they want. If the parties will be unfair to them, then the preferred candidates by the electorate will be elected. So as we talk of reforms in the IEBC, can we see also reforms from the grassroots, from the
Josephine, we seem to have network challenges there.
You cannot have trust with the. Are you getting it?
There's a problem with the network, but we had gotten most of your presentation. Maybe as we allow you to get a clear one, but at least we got the bits that you are presenting. Harrison, kindly take the floor.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I don't know whether you morning. Yes, I'm Harrison John from Kisii County. I represent Frontier Alliance Party. And I'd like also to comment a bit, kind of a repetition, because can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Harrison. We can hear you.
Yeah, I just want to bring this kind of a collection that I come to realize that there is kind of an, allow me to call it ignorance, because I want to tend to believe that political parties are more concerned about every situation that is happening on the ground. And I think this is the high time that as much as we speak about how we can make the IBC independent, it is also good that we make sure that political parties are strengthened, because I think a political party is a vehicle that can move all over in the villages, in the cities. So my contribution was that funding is very vital. And also, I don't know whether as we continue thinking about, also discussing about BBI, that it should also capture something that is speaking on how to empower political parties. My brother has spoken about just only 2 political parties are funded. I want to believe that the reason for funding is to make sure that there is smooth coordination from the grassroots. So my contribution today is just don't know whether it can be possible for the political parties to be put on the same table, regardless of how big the party is, because Most of the small political parties are being consumed by the bigger ones. And once a political party has been verified, I think it is also good that we also be given, all the political parties should be given, should be considered and also funded fairly. So that's a much that I can say for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Jalagat Tirop, you have the floor kindly.
A very good morning. Can you hear me, Duncan?
Yes, good morning.
Yes, mine is not just a question. I would want to applaud the organizers of the forum for convening this forum. Secondly, I would want to say that Marcus had spoken about something on county elections board. I second that one. Thank you.
Wow, very brief and to the point. So, Marcus, the issue, now let me go to Marvin. The political parties, the concerns and all that, and from where Jalagat has, where Tirop has left, county elections board for political parties, is this something that can be achievable given that parties cannot at least even have substantive officials in office?
Yeah, this is a matter of structure. And when we talk of structures, you know, most of our political parties, we are still growing these institutions. So the only thing that very few political parties have tried is just to decentralize the power from the headquarters to their officials at the county level. And the most risk that people face in such a case is the loss of control and influence and power. You know, once power is concentrated at the top, that is when we normally have a lot of pressure in most political party secretariat or headquarters, with very little happening. And something else that has been an hindrance, you know, Office of the Registrar of Political Parties gives a minimum of 24 county offices to be established, which has always been a challenge to most political parties, considering how our parties are funded and the number of parties that are there that are actually registered in this country. Because when you look at the practicability of how you can fund almost for the 74 or above 70 registered political parties, at times it is not practical. And I want to acknowledge the fact that there was a time that there was a percentage that a few political parties could get, and another percentage of the funds, of the government funds, that could be shared by other political parties. But this was since amended, and that is why we are currently in the state that we are. Talking of how we can empower our county structures, it is something practical. When you look at most of our constitutions, our party constitution, and I'll speak specifically to the constitution of Jubilee Party, you'll find the structure at the headquarters is actually replicated at the county level. But to make them functional and them to run out the same function as that of the headquarters has been a challenge in terms of you may attribute it to the number of times that we do election at our county level, because in most cases you'll find some of our counties, immediately after an election, some people will change parties, including your officials, and you'll be bound to replace. But if this is implemented, and it is something that we've tried in our by-election to empower the county election board and the county and our branch to run out primary on their own, and we've actually seen it working. It is something that is achievable, only that parties have to be strengthened. We need to build this political institution to organizations that are fairly funded and that have capacity to do such programs within the county level. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you. Marcus, what do you make of that? Is Marvin Wamukota being political, or his argument is convincing as an observer?
Duncan.
Yes, please.
Would repeat the question?
I'm asking, is Marvin being political, or his argument is convincing?
I think he's convincing, really. I don't want to put Marvin in the spot at this point, but I think he's convincing.
Thank you very much. I want, there's an observation here by Mwahija Mwange, and I would want Salome you to tell us. He says, election is a process, yet we let our political parties engage in corruption, and we need to strengthen the 4 institutions, which are IBC, SEC, police, and judiciary. What mechanism is supposed to be put in place to address such a matter? Salome.
Thank you, Marcus. That's a good observation, and that is why I said perhaps we need to be empowered more. Now, short of the Electoral Code of Conduct, this was watered down. You remember Parliament had given IBC both investigative and prosecutorial powers based on any malpractices or offenses that may be conducted during an election. Now, in the run-up to 2017, there were late amendments that then returned the power of prosecution to the DPP. Much earlier, it was easier for the Commission to actually prosecute election offenders. But without that, now we rely on DPP. The most we can do is investigate, assist in the investigations, and then the ball moves over to the DPP's court. What we'd be looking at is a more strengthened mechanism, because even when we get complaints like what we saw in Matungu or in any other polling area, we then work very fast with the police. But as to the time it will take to prosecute these persons is something we can't control. Ours is just to seek a more strengthened framework that seeks to hold culprits accountable with much immediacy than what we are seeing now. From where we sit as IBC, we still have some powers under the Electoral Code of Conduct. Within that Code of Conduct is established the Electoral Code of Conduct Enforcement Committee, which is chaired by the chairperson of the IBC. To some extent, that committee has powers to actually summon persons who have violated the Electoral Code of Conduct, violations of the Code of Conduct or malpractices of aspects within the Electoral Code of Conduct. And in 2017, we did hold quite a number of aspirants accountable. We did not reach to the extent of expelling them from the elections or disqualifying them from the elections, but we started somewhere, and I believe I would take accolades for what we achieved in 2017 as a gain from 2013. We find quite a number. You remember we find in Garissa, we find in Wajir, we find the current senator of the current speaker of the Senate, close to 3 million shillings based on the gravity of the offense. And in Wajir, we actually even stopped the candidates from campaigning because the campaigns had become too violent, and so the commission put a total stop to it. So to answer his question, ours is to seek a more strengthened mechanism, and it is something that is work in process. We have engaged the institutions that he has mentioned, and we are working towards putting in place that mechanism. Allow me also to weigh in on the issue of political party funding. Now, as Marvin has indicated, Section 7.2a is very clear. It actually says for one to be registered as a political party, you must have, your members must be registered voters, at least 1,000 registered voters from more than half of the 24 counties. Now, the argument Parliament has had, it is Parliament that put that legislation. It is not the Registrar of Political Parties. But Parliament's argument was that is the best way to know to ascertain or to weigh that this political party has a national character. Now, if this is operating as an obstacle for political parties, then there is ground and justification through dialogue to propose amendments to that particular section. Party funding is something that we have been in discussions with since 2013. Of course, a number of political parties have been arguing that we need to open the space so that we fund more political parties. When you look at Section 25, it has certain criteria in terms of the number of votes that a party will have garnered in a particular general election. And as we moved into 2017, we tried to make it more difficult in this sense. We want to see how many SIGs you have represented after the general election. We want to see, we want to provide cutoffs such that you will not qualify, for example, if you don't have, in fact, the law is very clear, you must have 20 MPs, 3 senators, 3 governors, and 40 MCs. And perhaps the question before us is, did we put too stringent measures that certain political parties will now not qualify for that funding? But it is a debate that is ongoing, and for us, we would be arguing for more funding for even the smaller political parties. As a gender activist, my argument stems from the fact that most women are fielded by some of these small political parties. Why can't we fund the small political parties also, so that we give platforms to those who are somewhat disenfranchised, even as they compete in our larger political parties? And finally, Bishar had asked the question on whether Commission has plans to accredit ordinary mwananchi to observe elections. It is possible, but through certain guidelines and criteria we have put in place. Because even as we say anybody can observe an election, you have to ensure that such person is not partisan. We have to ascertain why you want to observe. We have to ascertain your capabilities. Persons have sinister motives of why they want to be in a polling station or within a polling area. And I think that is why we have put specific guidelines and criteria that we expect every observer, I'm sure Marcus can speak to that every observer must observe before you come in to observe an election. But as an individual, yes, Bishar, you can apply to the commission. Once you meet the criteria we are looking for, then we will accredit you accordingly.
Thank you. I would have said ulianza na roho unataka kumaliza na mwili. Now you started very well. Now you've ended up by saying as a gender activist. Anyway, that is on a lighter note. Ladies and gentlemen, I can see it's midday. That is the time we are supposed to be winding up. And Salome, it's good that you also had to place your mind on something. I would want to take that as your closing remark. Then I want to cross over to Marcus, now that you invoked his name. Marcus, you can give us your closing remarks, then we'll go to Marvin, because I don't see any other question. All the participants, nobody has raised their hand up, but time is not on our side. So Marcus, if you could give us your closing remarks as well, and then Marvin.
Thank you very much, Duncan and the rest of the team. I just want to reiterate an earlier statement that I made about the 8 core issues that continue to affect the realization of a credible electoral process in the country. And one of the things that I think is critical is that trust deficit that I spoke about, that I don't know, it's going to be a challenge. How do we work towards making these institutions work for the people on the one hand, but also how do we also make us work for these institutions? Because elections generally is not, it's not only meant for the EMBs. Elections is not only for the IEBC, it's not only for the political parties, but also elections, we all have a responsibility towards realization of this crucial fundamental human right. So I think even as we move forward, we need to ask ourselves the tough questions, including how do citizens and the agencies contribute towards the realization of a credible process. And that discussion should be picked up, should be convened, should be disseminated. How do we ensure that our elections really respond to our own needs? And that marks the end of my briefing. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Marvin Wamukota. Please take us home. If you can make it brief, we will appreciate.
Thank you, Duncan. For me, in closing, I just want to say I believe all political parties have the same mandate, provided you are registered. So to some extent, I'm not a believer of small and big political parties. Some of us in Jubilee, maybe you are holding that position in the interim level. Maybe next time it will be ANC or Ford Kenya or whichever other party. So we all have to be fair in terms of how we operate and how we relate with the other bodies. And from the past, we can relate to an aspect where a political party has an influence of even of reducing the voter turnout from 80% to as low as 30%. So building trust in the electoral body, it has to be the intention of all of us key players. An individual voter actually will say they have no problem with maybe the body, but in case of how you are treated from the time you enter into a polling station, or even from the time you register as a member, as a voter, to the time that you finally cast your vote and you receive the results, individuals never have issues, but issues have always been brought by us, the political players, and how we cast our aspersions into the process. So I believe together with all the political parties, we can actually build trust and eliminate this thing Marcus was calling bad manners in our political parties and moral issues. And this will ensure that we actually attain the level of perception and fair and credibility of our election processes. And in completion, I think I want to commend IBC for introduction of the KIMS kit, that thing just to automate our election process. This is a basis upon which everything can actually be verifiable and have integrity in terms of if at all everything is put into open in ascertaining if an election process was free and fair. Thank you, Duncan, and thank you for this discussion, and thank you to CMD for convening us to have such a discussion. And I'm looking forward towards trying for us to actually come up with a tangible recommendation that we can have on the table and start the discussion with tangible documentation in terms of the reforms that we want to see around the election matters. Thank you, Duncan, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Now, Benjamin, you want to mess up with the protocol. We were almost handing over the ball to our super striker, Maureen, to plant the ball into the net and end this match. But I can see your hand is up. Let me use my little powers, remaining powers, before I surrender power to Maureen. Kindly be brief, because the main discussants were giving their closing remarks. We were done. We are almost there. If you can keep your comments in a minute, let us not lock you out kindly. Benjamin, going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There being no response from your end, at least we've done our best. So Maureen, now end the match. Maliza mchezo, and thank you very much everyone for your participation.
Thank you so much, Khaemba, for that perfect moderation. I think Benjamin's hand has been up and down. I'm not so sure if he had a question to ask, but if he did, maybe Benjamin, you can get back to me and I'll be able to respond so that we can ensure that you can also get in contact with some of the panelists so that you can get the response that you may be wanting. So let me take this opportunity to thank everyone for staying in the meeting up to this time. Actually, we just, I think, 2 minutes past the program, but I'm happy that we were able to, ask questions and interact during this session. And we're glad for the feedback that we've gotten from each and every one of you, and especially from the panelists. And I hope as we even move towards the 2022 general elections, and as we continue even implementing some of the activities that are remaining, we'll be able to give in the views that are from this meeting that are going to help us to even reform some of the frameworks that we have in the various political processes. So let me take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, especially the participants. You are an awesome audience today. At least we didn't have so much interruptions, and we thank you for that. To our panelists, asanteni sana, asante sana Marvin for taking time to attend this meeting. Marcus, thank you so much. Salome, of course, thank you so much. We are always happy to have you and online and to also engage with you all the time. And thank you so much for taking us through what the IEBC is doing. And I hope that the participants now know what IEBC does and they're not sleeping. There are some things that they do that we do not know that they are doing. But thank you so much, Salome, for making that very clear. Marcus, thank you, Pia, for giving us your overview of what you people can observe out there. And I hope that even from the last meetings that we have, you'll be able to give in feedback in real time to the political parties and the electoral management system so that they can be able to amend whatever processes they are doing and at the right time. Khaemba, thank you for the moderation, and we're always happy to have you online. Thank you for taking us through the Q&A session and also through the panel discussions. So from here in CMD-Kenya, just to say asanteni sana for everyone who attended the meeting, and I hope that we will continue to engage further even throughout this year. Otherwise, asanteni sana and have a lovely day and a lovely weekend. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Goodbye, Maureen. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye, comrades. See you next time.
Ndio tumemaliza hii ingine na login sahi.
Goodbye, comrades. Next time. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Come on.
More of this.
Yes.
I think someone just called me.
Yes, we're looking for more of this. Forward, looking for more of these trainings.
Sure, we will endeavor to do that even as we continue with finalizing the project implementation, and we hope that we can have more interactions as we move forward. Karibu sana. Thank you so much. You're free to leave at your own pleasure.